I am Richard, 72 years old, and last week I learned the kind of betrayal that shatters a man's soul. You might think betrayal comes from enemies, from strangers, from people who never cared for you, but what happens when it comes from the very children you gave your life for? That is the question I was forced to face. It began with a phone call, calm and rehearsed, from my oldest son. He said, "Dad, it's time. We've made all the arrangements. You're moving into a nursing home tomorrow." My heart stopped. My hand trembled so violently I almost dropped the phone. "A nursing home," I whispered, unable to believe what I was hearing, but his voice was steady, almost cold. "Yes, Dad. It's what's best for you. We've already sold the house. Don't worry, you'll be taken care of." In that moment, the world around me went silent. The walls of my living room, covered in photos of my late wife, seemed to close in on me. The laughter of my grandchildren that once filled this house was replaced by a chilling echo. My own children, the ones I had raised with blood and sweat, had sold the home where their mother and I built a life together. They sold it without asking me, without even a word of respect. And now they were discarding me like an old piece of furniture no longer useful. I asked him where I was supposed to go. What would happen to all the memories, the furniture, the books, the garden? He replied with words that cut deeper than any knife. "Dad, it's just a house. You can't take it with you. This way you'll be safe and we'll handle everything else. Just a house." Those were the words, just a house. But for me, it was 45 years of my life. It was where I had carried my wife across the threshold, where we had raised 2 children, where she had taken her last breath in my arms. Just a house, he called it. And they had already stripped it away from me. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for what felt like hours. The ticking of the old clock on the mantel mocked me each second, reminding me that my children had judged my time to be over. They had judged me to be useless. Do you know what it feels like to be erased while you are still breathing? To be told your value has expired? That was the wound they carved into my chest that day. But I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't let them hear the storm inside me. Because the truth they didn't know, was that I had been preparing for this very moment for years. I had seen the signs, subtle at first, then bolder, and though it broke my heart, I had set things in motion. So, when they thought they had taken everything from me, when they thought they had stripped me down to nothing, they had no idea I was still holding the final card. The house they sold was not theirs to claim. The life they thought they controlled was not theirs to direct. I let them believe their victory was complete, because sometimes the sweetest justice is patience. Sometimes you let betrayal ripen until it collapses under its own weight. That night, I packed a small bag, not with clothes, but with memories, an old photograph of my wife, her wedding ring, that I kept on a chain, a worn journal filled with letters I had written but never sent. I carried these with me as they drove me to the nursing home, their voices full of fake reassurance. "Dad, you'll love it here. It's peaceful, clean, professional." I nodded, silent, staring out the window, as the house I built faded from sight. They thought I was defeated. They thought I was broken. But deep inside me, beneath the grief, a fire was burning. A fire they had lit themselves. And that fire was going to consume their lies. You see, betrayal has a way of sharpening the soul. It cuts you open, but inside those cuts, you find something raw, something unstoppable. As they left me in that sterile room, with pale walls and the smell of disinfectant, I whispered to myself, "They have no idea what is coming." And now I ask you who are listening, what would you have done in my place? What would you feel if the children you raised sold your home and sent you away like yesterday's news? If you believe this betrayal is the cruelest act a parent can endure, then I ask you to write the number 1 right now, because this is only the beginning of my story. When I tell you my children betrayed me, I know some of you will wonder how a father could ever come to that point. So let me take you back to the days when trust was still unbroken, when my house was filled with warmth instead of silence. My wife, Margaret, was the heart of our home. She had a laugh that carried through every hallway, and a way of looking at me that reminded me I was more than just a man working long hours to keep the lights on. She believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Together we built a life inside that house, brick by brick, memory by memory. I remember carrying her over the threshold on the day we moved in. She clung to my neck, laughing like a girl, even though she was already pregnant with our first child. We didn't have much then. The kitchen table was secondhand, the couch had a tear in the corner, and the backyard was just dirt. But we had dreams, and those dreams were enough to make everything feel like gold. Our son was born a month later in the small upstairs bedroom we had painted sky blue. I remember holding him for the first time, his tiny hand wrapped around my finger, and promising silently that I would give him the life I never had. Years later, our daughter arrived born in the same house, and we painted her room a warm yellow that caught the morning sun. Those children were not just my responsibility. They were my pride, my reason to push through 12-hour shifts, my motivation to keep going when exhaustion weighed me down. I worked construction in those years, sometimes 3 jobs at once. My back ached, my hands were calloused, but every Friday when I put my paycheck on the table and Margaret kissed my cheek, it all felt worth it. I told myself it was temporary, that one day the kids would see all I sacrificed, that they would carry forward not just my blood, but my values. And for a long time, I believed they did. Our dinners were sacred. Margaret cooked, I carved the roast, and the kids told us about school. We laughed, we argued, we dreamed. I remember my son once standing on a chair, declaring that he would be a businessman one day, that he would buy me a big office so I could finally sit instead of sweat. My daughter, sweet and shy, said she wanted to be a teacher, like the ones she admired. I looked at them both and thought everything is possible. That is what fathers believe when their children are young. They believe in possibilities. The years went on. Money was always tight, but we made do. When my son wanted to go to college out of state, I mortgaged part of the house. I told Margaret not to worry, that an education was an investment. When my daughter needed braces, I worked overtime and sold my truck, walking to work for almost a year, so she could smile without shame. Every sacrifice felt natural. That is what parents do, isn't it? They trade pieces of themselves so their children can have more. And in return, all they hope for is gratitude, maybe respect, maybe love. When Margaret fell ill, everything changed. She battled cancer for 3 long years, and our home became a place of both struggle and tenderness. My children were grown by then. My son was chasing deals in the city, my daughter married and raising kids of her own. They came back when they could, but the weight of her care fell on me. I didn't mind. She was my partner, my everything, and if she had to fade, then I would hold her hand every second until she did. The night she passed away, she whispered to me, "Take care of the house, Richard. This is where we lived. This is where I'll always be." Those words became sacred. The house was not just wood and bricks. It was the vessel of our entire life, of promises and memories that could never be replaced. After she was gone, I found myself alone in the silence. The laughter of children, the warmth of her presence, it all lingered like ghosts. I tended the garden she loved. I polished the wooden banister she once leaned on. I sat at the table and remembered her setting down plates with that tired smile that always carried love. My children visited sometimes with their own kids, the house filled with noise again, and for brief moments I felt whole. My son would pat my back and say, "Don't worry, Dad, we'll take care of you." My daughter would hug me and whisper, "You're not alone." Those words were like balm to my aching heart. I believed them. I wanted to believe them. I trusted that the sacrifices I had made would live inside them as gratitude. I trusted that the lessons I taught, honesty, loyalty, hard work, would guide them. I trusted that blood truly meant something. Looking back now, I see how blind I was. But at the time, I clung to that trust as if it were air. Because without it, what does a father have? That is why their betrayal cut so deep. It wasn't just the house they sold. It wasn't just the nursing home they chose for me. It was the shattering of every promise, every memory, every sacrifice. It was the rewriting of history, the denial of all that had been beautiful. Do you understand now why I said it felt like being erased? Because in that moment, they didn't just discard me. They discarded the man who had built their future. And so, as you listen, I ask you this: do you think the sacrifices of a parent should be honored no matter what? Do you believe that the blood and sweat of a father should mean something in the hearts of his children? If your answer is yes, then I want you to write the word "yes" below. Let me know I am not alone in believing that love and sacrifice should never be forgotten. After Margaret passed, I tried to live quietly, cherishing the visits from my children. At first, everything seemed normal. My daughter would bring her kids and let them play in the garden, and my son would come on weekends with stories of his business ventures. But slowly, I began to notice changes, small cracks that widened with time. They weren't obvious at first, and maybe that's why I ignored them. Or Maybe I chose not to see them because the alternative was too painful. My son stopped asking how I was. He would sit at the table, eyes glued to his phone, and when I asked about work, he only muttered vague answers. His tone with me grew impatient, as if every word I spoke was an interruption. He started saying things like, "Dad, the house is too big for you. You should think about moving somewhere smaller." At first I thought he cared, but then he repeated it again and again, almost like he was rehearsing a script. My daughter, once tender and gentle, began to bring up money in strange ways. "Dad, you should let me help with your bills. Maybe I should manage your account just to make things easier." I refused politely, but she pressed again the following week and again the week after that. Her hugs grew shorter, her eyes darted away when I asked why she needed access. It was as if she wanted to cloak her intentions in kindness, but the kindness felt thinner each time. Then came the missing documents. I kept all important papers in a drawer in my study. Insurance forms, mortgage documents, even Margaret's medical records. One day I opened the drawer and saw it wasn't quite the same. A folder had shifted. A paperclip was missing. I told myself maybe I had forgotten, maybe age was making me careless. But then the bank statements started arriving late. When I finally checked, certain amounts were missing. Small sums, at first nothing large enough to ring alarms, but enough for me to question. I confronted my son lightly. "Have you been helping yourself to my account?" He laughed too quickly. "Dad, you're imagining things. Maybe the bank made a mistake." But the look in his eyes betrayed him. He avoided meeting mine, as if he knew I could still read him, like I did when he was a boy hiding broken toys under his bed. At family dinners, I noticed whispers between him and my daughter. Their conversations would stop the second I entered the room. I would hear fragments, signatures, papers, the house, and then silence. They smiled at me too widely afterward, a performance that only deepened my suspicion. Still, I silenced my doubts. I told myself, these are my children. They would never hurt me, because to believe otherwise was unbearable. But the red flags grew bolder. One evening I overheard my daughter on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't know I was in the hallway. She said, "Don't worry. Once the deed is transferred, it's done. He won't fight it. He can't." Her words froze me in place. The deed. She was talking about the house. Our house. The house Margaret had begged me to protect. I stepped back quietly, heart pounding, and when she saw me moments later, she smiled and asked if I wanted tea. I nodded, pretending I hadn't heard, but my world tilted dangerously that night. The final straw came in the form of a letter addressed to me, but hidden in a pile of junk mail. It was from a bank I had never used, detailing a loan application in my name. My signature forged scrawled at the bottom. The loan used the house as collateral. My hands shook as I read it, my chest tightening until I thought I would collapse. They weren't just circling me like vultures. They had already begun to carve. Do you know what it feels like to doubt the people you love most? To look into the eyes of your children and wonder if the smile they give you is real or a mask. It is worse than death, because death takes the body, but betrayal takes the soul. I wanted to scream, to confront them, to demand answers, but instead I kept silent. I let them think I was blind, let them believe I was the frail old man they painted in their minds. Because deep inside, I realized something: I needed to see how far they would go. Only then could I know the truth. And sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to set yourself free. So I waited. I pretended not to notice the missing papers, the whispers, the forged documents. I smiled at their visits, nodded at their lies, and inside, I carved every detail into memory. Each red flag became a stitch in a fabric of betrayal that was wrapping around me tighter each day. And though it suffocated me, I let it, because I knew the storm was coming, and I was determined to meet it with my eyes wide open. Now, I ask you, listening to my story, have you ever noticed small signs that someone you trust might be deceiving you? Have you ever chosen to look away hoping you were wrong, even as the evidence piled up? If you have, then write the number 8 below. Let me know. I am not the only one who ignored the whispers until they became screams. The day the truth fully revealed itself was one of those afternoons where the air feels heavy, like the sky itself is waiting for something to break. I had just returned from the market carrying a paper bag with bread and milk when I saw a thick envelope slipped halfway under my door. No stamp, no postmark. Someone had placed it there by hand. Inside was a copy of a legal document. My breath stopped when I saw the title, Transfer of Deed. It bore my name, but not my handwriting. My children had done it. They had drawn up papers to sell my house, the house Margaret and I built, with 40 years of sweat and laughter without my consent. The signatures were forged, my rights erased with a pen stroke. The house they planned would no longer belong to me. I sat at the kitchen table staring at those pages. My hands trembled, but not with weakness, with rage. My children, my own flesh and blood, had reduced me to a helpless old man in their minds, someone who could be tricked and discarded like worn-out furniture. They thought I would never fight back. But here's the part they didn't know. I am not the helpless man they imagined. Because years ago, Margaret and I had seen the world for what it was. We had watched friends grow old only to be tricked by relatives or scammed by strangers. And Margaret, with her gentle wisdom, once told me, "Richard, promise me you'll protect what we built, even from those closest to us, if you must." At the time, I thought her words too heavy, almost cynical. But I promised. And I kept that promise. What my children never knew was that I had prepared a trust, an irrevocable trust, long before Margaret passed. Every major asset, including this house, had already been moved under its protection. The trust bore only one name as beneficiary, mine. It was untouchable by anyone else, including my children. I had worked quietly with an old friend, a lawyer named Mr. Hayes, who had sworn to keep it confidential until I decided otherwise. The forged documents in my hand meant nothing legally. My house, my dignity were safe. But I didn't reveal this to them. Not yet. Because the betrayal cut so deep, I needed them to face the consequences of their greed. I needed them to believe they had won, so that when the truth struck, it would strike like thunder, splitting the earth. That night as I lay in bed, I remembered Margaret's laughter echoing in the hallways. I remembered her saying, "One day this house will be full of grandchildren, full of stories." And now, my children were trying to sell those memories for a stack of cash. I whispered into the dark, "Don't worry, Margaret. They will not succeed. I'll keep my promise." The next morning, my daughter came over with a smile too wide, carrying a casserole dish she didn't even bother to heat. She placed it on the counter and said, "Dad, we've been thinking, maybe it's time you had more care. A place where people can look after you every day. A nursing home, maybe. It's what's best for you." I stared at her face. The softness I once knew was gone. Her words were rehearsed, calculated. "A nursing home," I repeated, letting my voice tremble as if I were frail. "Yes, Dad. We can visit, of course, but it's better for you." Behind her, my son appeared carrying folders he didn't even try to hide. He laid them on the table like a hunter laying down his kill. "This is the paperwork," he said flatly. "We'll help you move next week. The house is already taken care of." Already taken care of. The arrogance in his voice almost made me laugh. They thought I had no choice, that my life was now theirs to arrange. But they didn't know that, while they were sharpening their knives, I had already built a shield. I nodded slowly, pretending to be broken. "If that's what you think is best." My son smiled thinly. My daughter patted my hand. They believed the battle was over, but in truth, it had just begun. That evening, when the house was quiet again, I opened the drawer where I kept Margaret's old recipes and pulled out a worn notebook. Between its pages was a card with Mr. Hayes' number written in his neat, careful script. I dialed it. "Richard," he answered after 2 rings, his voice steady as stone. "I wondered when you'd call. They're trying to sell the house," I said. "They forged my name. They want to put me in a nursing home." "I figured something like this might happen," Hayes replied. "That's why the trust was the best move. The house is untouchable. They can sign all the papers they want. It won't matter. But do you want me to intervene now?" "Not yet," I whispered, glancing toward the hallway as if my children were listening. "I want them to think they've succeeded. Let them believe I'm helpless. And then when the time is right, I want everything revealed at once. Every deed, every account, every lie." Hayes was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You always were a patient man, Richard." "Very well. I'll be ready when you give the word." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, the weight of betrayal still heavy, but balanced now by the fire of certainty. My children thought they had stripped me of everything, but what they didn't know was that I held every card. The house was mine, the assets were mine, and soon the truth would be mine to reveal. I want you listening to my story, to imagine this your own children looking you in the eye and telling you they're sending you to a place where strangers will decide when you eat, when you sleep, when you breathe fresh air, all while they claim your home as theirs. How would you feel? Would you fight, or would you surrender? If you would fight with every last breath, then type the number 9 in the comments. Let me know you would not give up your dignity so easily. Because I won't. And this is only the beginning. I agreed to their plan. I let my children believe they had broken me, that I was too weary to resist. My son scheduled the movers, my daughter researched nursing homes, and within a week, I was packed into a small room on the far side of town, a place with pale yellow walls and the smell of bleach and boiled vegetables. They called it a care facility. To me, it was a holding cell for the forgotten. Every morning, a nurse knocked softly before entering, speaking to me in the same tone one would use for a child. "Time for your medicine, Mr. Brooks." I didn't argue. I swallowed the pills, ate the tasteless meals, and watched from the window as the other residents shuffled across the garden, their heads bent under invisible weights. I played the role my children had written for me, the frail old man whose life was no longer his own. But inside my mind was sharp, my resolve unshaken. Every visit they made was another chance to observe them, to memorize their lies. My son strutted in with forced cheer, asking if I was comfortable, while his eyes darted to the clock, eager to leave. My daughter pretended tenderness, adjusting my blanket, but her phone buzzed constantly with messages she tried to hide. They thought they had won. And in a way they had, because I let them. Meanwhile, Mr. Hayes kept me informed. "Richard," he told me over the phone, his voice hushed, though he knew no one could overhear. "Your trust is untouched. The forged documents have no power, but your children have already approached real estate agents about the house. They believe it's theirs to sell." "Let them," I replied. "The higher they climb, the harder they'll fall." Word began to spread in the neighborhood. My lifelong neighbor, Mrs. Green, came to visit one afternoon. She brought me cookies in a tin box and whispered, "Richard, is it true your son sold the house?" "People are talking." I forced a weary smile. "That's what they believe." Her eyes filled with pity and anger. How could they? After all the years you and Margaret spent building that home. After all the love you poured into your family. I squeezed her hand. Sometimes people reveal their true selves only when they think no one is watching. The whispers grew louder. At the grocery store near my old house, neighbors saw my children bragging about investments, hinting at selling property, speaking like owners. But when asked directly, they waved it off, claiming everything was handled. Their arrogance became the talk of the town. Then came the first real crack in their performance. My son received a notice from a bank demanding payment on a loan he believed secured by my house. But the trust prevented that. The bank rejected the collateral. Furious, he stormed into the nursing home one evening, red-faced, slamming the papers on my bedside table. "Dad, did you do something? Why is the bank saying you're not the owner of the house?" I showed them the deed we signed. I looked at him calmly, masking the satisfaction that burned inside me. "Son, sometimes banks know more than we think." He cursed under his breath, pacing like a trapped animal. "Don't play games with me, Dad. We need that money," Edward promised. He stopped himself, realizing too late he had said too much. Edward, the so-called business partner my daughter had mentioned in passing. So, that was it. My son had tied himself to a snake, and now both were coiled around lies they couldn't control. My daughter arrived 2 days later, eyes swollen from crying. She sat on the edge of my bed and whispered, "Dad, please sign a new paper. Just this once. We'll fix everything, I promise. We'll take care of you. We just need you to cooperate." "Cooperate?" I asked softly. "Like when you cooperated by forging my name." Her face turned pale. She hadn't expected me to know. "You think I didn't notice the missing documents, the fake signatures, the whispers behind closed doors? You think I'm blind? I see everything, Angela." She broke, then sobbing into her hands. For a moment I almost reached out, almost forgave her right there. But then I remembered Margaret's words, "Protect what we built even from those closest to us if you must." That night I called Mr. Hayes. It's time to prepare the next step. They're unraveling on their own. I want the truth to strike when they were at their weakest. He agreed. Together we devised a planned public exposure. At the next neighborhood council meeting, documents would be presented showing the true ownership of the house and assets. My children would be confronted not just by me, but by an entire community they had deceived. Days turned into weeks. My children's visits grew frantic, desperate. My son demanded signatures, my daughter begged for forgiveness sometimes in the same breath. Their facade of unity fractured arguments spilling into my room where the nurses overheard. Word spread quickly. Soon even the staff whispered, "Those children are trying to rob their own father." The tension became unbearable. Every knock on my door felt like thunder. Every whisper in the hallway carried the weight of betrayal. The storm I had anticipated was here, and it grew fiercer each day. And yet I waited. I let them dig deeper, let them entangle themselves in their own lies. Because I knew the moment of reckoning was coming, and when it arrived, it would burn away every mask they had ever worn. Now, I ask you, if your own children betrayed you, would you expose them to everyone, or would you protect them in silence? Type yes. In the comments, if you believe truth must come out no matter the cost. Type like if you think family secrets should remain buried, because soon I will have to choose. The night before the council meeting, I hardly slept. I sat by the window of my small nursing home room, staring at the moonlight spilling across the floor, and thought of Margaret. I imagined her standing there, hands folded in that calm way of hers, whispering, "Be strong, Richard. This is the moment." My heart raced not from fear, but from the knowledge that everything was about to change. The next evening, the community hall was filled. Neighbors who had known me for decades sat shoulder to shoulder, whispering about the rumors about betrayal, forged papers a father cast aside. My children walked in, late-dressed sharply, wearing forced smiles. My son adjusted his tie with arrogance. My daughter clutched her purse like it was a lifeline. They didn't see me at first. I was seated near the front beside Mr. Hayes, who carried a leather briefcase heavy with documents. When my children finally spotted me, their faces faltered. My son leaned toward my daughter and muttered something through clenched teeth. She nodded nervously. They thought this was another community meeting where they could charm their way through. But tonight, charm would not save them. The council leader began with routine announcements, but tension hung so thick you could cut it with a knife. Then he cleared his throat and said, "There is one matter of serious concern we must address tonight. A matter involving Mr. Richard Brooks and the property on Maple Street." All eyes turned toward me. I rose slowly, leaning on my cane, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. "My children believe they own my home," I said. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My son jumped to his feet. "Dad, please, this isn't the place. Let's not embarrass ourselves." "Sit down," I told him, and for the first time in years, he obeyed, his face flushing with rage. Mr. Hayes stood beside me, opening his briefcase with deliberate calm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "what you are about to see are legal documents verifying the true ownership of Mr. Brooks's assets. These include the irrevocable trust established years ago, which ensures that no transfer of property can occur without his consent. Any forged documents presented elsewhere hold no legal weight." Gasps echoed through the room. Hayes held up the trust papers for all to see. My daughter covered her mouth with her hand. My son's jaw tightened as if he wanted to crush his teeth into dust. "You see," I continued, "my children thought I was blind, weak, incapable. They tried to sell the house their mother and I built, the house she asked me to protect. They forged my signature. They planned to lock me away while they lived in the ruins of our sacrifices. But what they didn't know is that Margaret and I planned ahead. I am not as powerless as they believed." The hall fell silent, except for the sound of my daughter's sobs. My son leapt up again, shouting, "This is a lie! He's manipulating all of you. Those documents are fake." Mr. Hayes turned toward him with the cold precision of a man who has spent a lifetime in courtrooms. "Every document has been verified, notarized, and recorded with the county. If you wish to challenge them, you'll be challenging the law, not just your father." The weight of truth crushed the air. My son's bravado cracked. His voice faltered. "We were only trying to help him. He couldn't take care of the house anymore. We did it for his own good." "Is that what you call it?" I thundered, my voice rising with decades of contained grief. "For my good, to strip me of my home, to forge my name, to cast me aside like garbage. You call that love?" The crowd stirred, people whispering, shaking their heads. Mrs. Green, my neighbor, spoke loudly from the back. "Shame on you. That house was your parents' life. And you wanted to sell it for what? A quick buck." Others joined in. The community that had once admired my children now looked at them with disgust. My daughter collapsed into a chair, sobbing openly. My son clenched his fist, trembling, but the fight had drained from him. He looked smaller somehow, like the boy he once was caught stealing from my wallet as a teenager. Only this time, the crime was greater, the betrayal deeper. I stepped closer, my cane striking the floor with every step. I looked them both in the eyes, my voice steady, but heavy with sorrow. "You thought you were clever. You thought you could erase me, but you forgot who I am. I am the man who worked until his hands bled so you could have an education. I am the man who sold his truck so your sister could smile without shame. I am the man who held your mother as she died, and promised her I would protect this family, and I kept that promise. But you sold your honor for greed. My son tried to speak, but no words came. My daughter reached toward me with shaking hands, whispering, "Dad, we're sorry. We didn't mean for it to go this far." I pulled back. "You didn't mean it. Every lie, every forged signature, every whisper behind my back says otherwise. You chose this path, and now you will face the consequences." Mr. Hayes handed them a letter. "Effective immediately, you are barred from making any claim on Mr. Brooks's property. Legal actions are being prepared regarding the forgery. I suggest you find your own place to live, because the house is no longer yours to even dream about." The room erupted, neighbors gasping, some clapping, others shaking their heads in disbelief. My children sat frozen, stripped bare before the very people they once sought to impress. I raised my cane high, then lowered it with finality. "You tried to sell my dignity, but tonight I take it back. You may have my blood, but you no longer have my trust." The words cut through the air like a blade, and in that moment I felt something lift from my chest. Not joy, not triumph, but a fierce, unshakable dignity, the kind that comes only when you've faced betrayal and refused to bow. As I left the hall, supported not by my cane, but by the steady applause of my neighbors, I heard Margaret's voice in my heart. "You kept your promise, Richard," and I knew I had. Now I turn to you, listening to my story. If you believe justice was finally served, if you believe a father's dignity can never be sold, then write yes in the comments. Because sometimes the only victory left to us is to stand tall, even when those closest to us try to cut us down. When the council meeting ended and the truth was laid bare, I walked out of that hall lighter than I had felt in years. My children followed behind me, but at a distance their heads lowered, their voices silent. The weight of public shame had stripped them of their pride. For once they weren't the confident manipulators who thought they held my life in their hands. They were just two broken people staring at the ruins of their own choices. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift. The forged documents, the fraudulent loan, the lies, they caught up with them faster than they ever imagined. Banks called in debts investors pulled out, and the community that once welcomed them now shut its doors. My son's so-called business partner, Edward, vanished overnight, leaving him with nothing but unpaid bills and angry creditors. My daughter, who once walked with polished confidence, was forced to explain to her own children why the house they boasted about was not theirs at all. And me, I did not return to the nursing home after that night. With Mr. Hayes' help, I moved into a smaller house on the edge of town, one Margaret and I had bought quietly years ago as an investment. It wasn't as grand as the home on Maple Street, but it was warm, and it was mine. I filled it with the photographs I had rescued, with the journals Margaret and I kept, with the small treasures that carried our memories. When I sat on the porch in the evening, the sun setting across the fields, I felt her presence beside me. And for the first time since she died, I didn't feel abandoned. The old house on Maple Street, the one my children tried to sell, was transferred to a charitable trust. It became a shelter for single mothers, a place where women and children in desperate need could find refuge. Every time I visit, I see laughter in the halls again. Not my children's laughter, not Margaret's, but new voices, new beginnings. And I know she would be proud. Her wish had been for that house to always hold life, not greed. My children tried to reach me after that, at first with anger, letters full of accusations blaming me for their downfall, then with excuses. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Dad. We just thought it was for the best." And finally with silence. Weeks passed without a word, months. Until one day my daughter came to the porch. She stood there, thinner eyes, tired, holding a paper bag of groceries like a peace offering. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad. I lost everything. I don't know who I am anymore." I looked at her, at the girl I once carried on my shoulders, the girl who used to run barefoot through the garden with her mother's laughter behind her. And for a moment, my heart broke all over again. I wanted to reach out to forgive, to forget, but the wound was still raw. Forgiveness is not a gift to be thrown carelessly. It is a burden one must earn. My son never came. Last I heard, he took work in another state, laboring in a warehouse, his suits replaced by overalls. Perhaps that was the justice he needed to learn what it feels like to sweat for survival, the way I once did for him. And me, I live quietly now. I tend a small garden, I drink coffee on the porch. I visit the shelter to see the women and children rebuilding their lives. I no longer look to my children for respect, because respect cannot be demanded. It must be given freely. Instead, I look inward at the dignity I refuse to let them steal. There are nights when I wake in the dark, my chest heavy with grief, and I wonder if things could have been different. Could I have guided them better? Could I have stopped their greed before it grew? Or was this always their path, one they chose regardless of the love I gave? I don't have the answers. Perhaps I never will. But I know this, I am not broken. They tried to erase me, but I stand here still holding the memories of a life built on sacrifice and love. My dignity is intact. My home may be different, my family fractured, but my soul is unbent. And that to me is victory enough. So now I turn to you, listening to my story. Tell me, should I forgive them? Should a father open his arms again to children who betrayed him so deeply? If you believe I should forgive, type the number 1 below. If you believe betrayal, this grave should never be forgiven, type the number 0. Because tonight I am torn between the pain of a father and the dignity of a man. And maybe your answer will help me find mine.